welcome back to the Holy Hardwood podcast with Pat and Tony. Uh, exciting weekend for the New Orleans Pelicans as they beat the Denver Nuggets, and then on a second night of a back-to-back, went against the tough Minnesota Timberwolves. Pat, what'd you kind of see from this weekend, and kind of talk to me about what you liked.
Hey Tony. Yeah, like you said, pretty strong weekend for this Pels team. Obviously had a pretty tough back to back. Following up a pretty daunting schedule here over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. But I'd say all things considered, for a back to back, especially with the limited group, right, as we're still dealing with some of those injuries, it was a strong performance and one that I think a lot of positives can be taken away from it. Although, um, despite only going 1-1 and splitting and letting one, that could be categorized as slipping away. Looking at last night's game, but altogether, I think it was a good performance and a good test, and I think one that everybody should be feeling pretty confident about following.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just kind of going off of these last three games, you've kind of seen this team piece it together a little bit. I think the addition of Herb getting back into the starting lineup and having Dyson out there as that second main defender, I think has, helped the likes of Jonas Valanciunas, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson. Uh, it's not so glaring out there when the team kind of might make a mistake here or there. So, kind of speak on that defensive side of the ball and what you've liked those last three games here with that new starting lineup.
Yeah, I'd say those two have been really good. Speaking about Dyson and Herb, not only from a personal perspective, doing a good job of, um, contributing in terms of their own matchups, but at the same time, like you said, um, the contributions that they can both have at the floor while being there, in congruence with a guy like JV. Although JV is still struggling, but they certainly are able to cover up for him a lot better than the previous lineup. So when looking at that, it makes him a lot more valuable considering the things that he can do on the offensive end of the floor. So I'd say just that in itself, is worth the adjustment, and it allows JV to play extended minutes, and you're able to use him a little bit more effectively on the offensive end, just because they're able to limit some of the damage that he's dealing with from a defensive perspective.
Going off of Jonas's offensive game, particularly in these last two games, I kind of saw out there that the Pels may have, I don't know if they said something to him or it was just him kind of realizing this, but I felt like he was more, engaged. And right when the ball touched his hands, it wasn't kind of sticking there. He wasn't taking his 5 seconds to look around, then his 5 seconds to back someone down. It was like the ball hit his hands, he either shot it, made a move, or made a pass. Do you kind of did you see that as well, or am I kind of seeing something different?
No, I'd say it's fair to say he did look more decisive. Again, not sure if that's something that was premeditated from just himself, or if that was something that maybe was brought up to him when working through some of the film and looking at some of the past games. But certainly when he is decisive on the offensive end and plays at a little bit faster pace in terms of finding his shots and making the defense pay for whatever coverage they're in, right? If he's getting some one-on-one matchups, especially against some guys that aren't as talented as a guy like Gobert, right? Obviously, that's an advantageous, position for the Pels. But again, I think a lot of it also just stems from the fact that he just wasn't under such constant attack defensively. So obviously, anytime you feel like you're being picked on over and over again, it's going to help your confidence in terms of the other side of the floor as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just, kind of like when JV is assertive like that and just kind of lets the offense flow. Um, so I really like that, particularly here over the weekend, seeing all of that offensively. But back to the defense, you've seen all these guys like Herb and Dyson get a bunch of deflections, leading us into the break and getting us into that fast break where we're hitting those threes and getting into a good flow. So hopefully we can begin to continue getting better on that end, and the offense slowly but surely starts getting a little more crisp as well.
Yeah, certainly. You've been hammering home on that for a couple weeks now that um, them being out in transition and playing at a little bit faster pace is something that helps a lot of these guys that may be limited in the half court. So, obviously, the more guys that you have out there that are active defensively and do have active hands that can disrupt plays and blow plays up, obviously that helps for the team in terms of heading to the other end and um, creating opportunities to score and play at that faster pace. So I think it certainly is. It helps both Dyson and Herb themselves, right? Having a secondary defender next to each one of them that allows each one of them to play a little bit more in transition in the open floor. Just because those two guys would probably be the two that you kind of pick on in terms of being limited in the half court offense. Um, in that aspect of their game. So, yeah, I think those two have been a really good fit, and I think that that's something that although they're going to more than likely revert back to the normal starting lineup, that you're going to see those two, anchor a lot of rotations and different lineups that are on the floor as we continue through the year.
No doubt. And just another guy to hit on is Najee Marshall. I feel like he's brought a lot of energy from coming off of his early season injury. And then again, when Dyson or Herb go to the bench, you still are having a second option there who's bringing the energy, defending, and kind of just getting out and running. So it's a good change of pace to have another guy as well coming off the bench that can bring those tools.
Yeah, Najee's always, played with that high motor and has been a pest on defense. So that's not new, but I think the biggest difference for him is in the past, he had a tendency to do all those great things defensively and, bring a lot of those characteristics that you look like, but then he would offset a lot of them with, some poor decisions and some poor shot IQ. But it looks like that's something that maybe he spent some time, working on and reviewing with the coaching staff because he is doing a better job of valuing that basketball. It seems to be that he has a higher, sense of value in terms of possession to possession. And then the last 2 or 3 games here specifically, he's added a dimension to the team also off the bench with some, timely perimeter shooting. So the best you can really hope for moving forward is he can emulate this as he moves through the coming weeks. Because, like you said, obviously having another body there that is able to bring both energy and defense, but also gives you a little bit of a punch in terms of offense when some of those more challenging groups are on the floor. So hopefully that's something we can look forward to, and we don't really see any slippage there when looking at Najee and his production.
Yeah, and to kind of go with the offense and how that's been looking, I feel Zion, particularly Friday, got off to a really good start. How do you think that the surgence of this defense getting a little better has led or bled into his game, where he may be getting a couple better opportunities in transition to start these games?
Well, I don't think it's a secret that offensively, he's a little bit more limited than other guys, of his stature in the league, right? He's a guy that's capable of scoring 25 a night, but most guys do it in a little bit more, dynamic ways than he does. He's very dependent on, attacking the rim, playing with athleticism and force. So, when he's not able to, be as effective when playing around the rim and getting out in transition, it just puts a lot of extra stress on his game. So, um, the more and more you give him the opportunity to work and play in space, then that's advantageous to him, and he's not having to certainly deal with some of those shortcomings that he has on the offensive end. So the more and more you can put him in those situations, I think you're going to start to see him get more back to himself and playing at a higher you know production value and playing some better basketball.
Yeah, and without you always bring up stuff about Zion. You can't leave out Bi. What have you seen from him in this last stretch of games here on this homestand? you think he's getting in a better of a rhythm or just more comfortable with the offense now that the defense is a little turned up? Where do you see those improvements by him?
He's been better. A lot of it to me also, besides just being active and engaged, which I think we talked about it possibly following the Dallas game, I believe. But to me, he's looked a little bit better physically too. I don't know if that's just maybe he had some nicks and bruises. I know in training camp there he was dealing with some minor little in not injuries but just ailments, right? So it looks like maybe 10, 12 games in, he's looking a little bit healthier and kind of finding his rhythm. He's always kind of been notorious for being a little bit more of a slow starter, so this certainly isn't outside the norm. Seeing him kind of pick up his pace and playing at a higher level here as we're, you know, a little bit further into the season and, about a month and a half removed from training camp. So, um, for the most part, seeing a lot of good things from him. There's still just a couple minor things you'd like to see him clean up, but I think it certainly helps him whenever they're playing at a higher pace as well, and he's not solely depending on having to play in the half court against set defenses as well. You see him; he'll get a couple easy buckets and maybe some transition or secondary transition, looks from the perimeter and helps him get into the free throw line also. So I don't think there's really anybody that's going to be hurt by the team playing that faster pace, and generating some easier looks. But again, for the most part, he's been very solid, but there's still a little bit of room for improvement.
And where would you say that improvement is? I know obviously he hasn't been shooting the ball too well from three, but I just like that he's getting those attempts up. So he kind of said in a interview, maybe it was Friday after the game, or it may have been after the Dallas game, saying, "Oh, well, once that goes, or if it starts to go, it's going to be a real problem because he's shooting north of 60% on his pull-up shots now, so that's getting pretty consistent and." He gets to the line a few more times a game, and then that three falls, like you said. I mean, that becomes very hard to guard.
Yeah, nothing with him is offensive based or shot selection based. Everything I would say is just mental lapses. Maybe just not valuing the ball as much as it should be on a possession to possession basis. He had a couple poor turnovers in the later stages of that game last night that I'm sure he'd like to have back. Just valuing the ball and really understanding what his responsibility is late, and then some of that also is just he still had a couple slippages defensively that he wasn't quite in the right spot or he was late. And so just small things like that takes a game where you say he, played really good to he doesn't make a couple of those errors, and then you're looking at that as a really excellent night, eclipsing 30 and going for nearly 10 rebounds and getting a lot of guys some good looks. So a lot of that's just on him, and he just needs to do little bit better job of just staying locked in from play to play and just not allowing himself to kind of lose focus as some of his touches might be diminishing, on a couple possessions here and there. So, but that's really the only thing that I'd call out.
Gotcha. And just to kind of go about last night's game, uh, up 14 in the fourth quarter, got a little tight, a little more physical. Is this just still you put it as some of these guys not being in this moment because it seems like they can get these leads, but not quite yet, finish these teams at the end. It could have been a little tiredness from the back to back, but I don't like to use that as an excuse by any means. So, where do you kind of see that falling where it kind of went the other way for them last night?
I think some of it also is just matchup basis, right? I mean, Minnesota isn't a team that they match up great against. Um, they've had a hard time beating Minnesota the last 2 or 3 years, right? They have some guys that present some issues in terms of defensive matchups, especially late in the game. A guy like Cat, he's tough to guard, especially as we want to go a little bit smaller and more versatile on the defensive end. But at the same time, they also have some length and some really good athletes on the perimeter that can disrupt guys like Brandon and when Zion's in the lineup. So it certainly has its issues just in terms of looking at the Timberwolves as a whole, but. Yeah, there is some inexperience there, but also, I'm gonna overlook that a little bit, right? I didn't see anything egregious that you could point back to and say, oh well, this was the exact reason why they lost this game because, you know, X player made this mistake. I mean, if anything, I think you'd be the first one to admit it. I mean, a lot of that comes down to, um, you know, Brandon's got to do a better job of valuing the ball late there. That's two possessions where we didn't get a look. I'm sure he's beating himself up over the split, you know, at the free throw line. But really, those three things are the three things that really take you from letting that game slip away to closing it out and it really not being a close game. Maybe you win by, you know, 5 to 7 points, and it's not even an issue coming down the stretch, you know. And not even looking at the last shot. I think the last shot was a good look. I think he had mentioned it. He was happy with the look. You know, maybe he should have decided to pull up maybe a dribble sooner just to give himself a little bit more space as he had already had the defender beat. But again, it's very small stuff. The margin of error in the league is so tight, right? Everybody's so good and so talented that all it takes is two or three decisions in the, you know, final 3 4 minutes in a game can swing and sway. So um, I would chalk it up to those couple areas right there. I don't think it's something that you need to start, you know, doing a deep dive and seeing, oh, well, why can't we close games out? I mean, the night before you saw them do a good job of closing out a really high caliber team. Whenever, you know, we had both guys, obviously it's a lot easier when we have two guys going back and forth rather than one guy having the responsibility, you know, 8 10 possessions in a row, especially with a team that, I believe is probably the highest rated defensive team in the league right now. So, you know, when we're limited offensively against a team that has not only the manpower to do it, but you know that's kind of their identity, right? That's something that they're going to lean on. I don't think you can really dig too much into it. I think the biggest um, takeaway from the game is they showed up, they played a really hard fought game, played with a lot of energy on a night that nobody would really blame them for coming out a little bit flat with a lack of energy due to that back to back. You know, after an emotional win against Denver. So I think for the most part, I take it as a positive. Yeah, it is one that slipped away and you'd like to have back, but if I had to really tally it up at the end of the night, I think it's more of a positive than a negative.
Yeah, agreed. Just kind of how you were saying the night before, Zion and Brandon, the last 4 or 5 minutes kind of closed that game out. And like you always say, this is a make or miss league. You know, one night they're going to make those plays and, you know, catapult us for those wins. And then last night, like you said, you got the shot you wanted. You maybe wish Brandon would have hit that free throw so it was at least tied. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're either going to make it or miss it. And, you know, Friday we made the shots and last night we didn't. And you just got to chalk it up as that and move on. And you know, you have another tough Sacramento team coming into the house tomorrow night and Wednesday. And, you know, the biggest thing I can take away from the weekend is, like you said, on the back to back, they could have came out flat. You know, they continued that energy on the defensive end. We're playing with pace. We're sharing the ball with each other. And you could kind of see they got that pop back into their step as a team. So that was at least really good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. That really you know, just aligns with everything that I'm saying. It seems like we're in lockstep there. So um just need to move forward and pick up the next one and hopefully best case scenario you're able to steal two from Sacramento, but you know, worst case scenario just take care of, you know, split the matchup, pick up a win against them and then look to hopefully here following you know, Thanksgiving later in the week we can certainly hopefully get a couple extra pieces back and then we can really start trending in the right direction.
Yeah, Pat. You know, just from a week ago till now, I think there's been some big strides made on that defensive end, and you know the offenses look good. So, you know, let's put another week together, and hopefully you can go 3-0, and then if not, you just try to get the next best thing. And so just take care of these home games here, and then Friday's that in-season tournament game against the Clippers, which is huge. So I believe if they win that, they'll be, you know, locked in to be going to Vegas and stuff like that, or however that works. So, you know, a lot of big games coming up this week.
Yeah, I agree. The most important thing that they can do at this point, right, is just continue to progress, improve in the areas that they're deficient in, and you know, ultimately, you don't love to start the year with any issues, right, and you know, some extended losing streaks. But as long as you're continuing to trend in the right direction over the next couple weeks and months, and you start to gain some more chemistry. There's no reason at all besides outside of some small moves around the you know, margins that this team can't be a high level team that can compete or that can compete with any team in the league on a night in night out basis. So I think that should be the goal and the objective, on a week to week basis. And looking at this last week, like you said, they accomplished that. But now the important part is to forget about that and move on to the next week and build off of it. So I look forward to hopefully seeing that as we move through this week.
No doubt about it, Pat. Like I said, Sacramento Kings coming in tomorrow and Wednesday. Gotta protect home court like we've been doing here. So very interested in to see how this week shakes out.
Yep, we'll be watching along this week, and hopefully, like you said, we're able to steal a couple wins. But biggest thing is just continue to move forward. So hopefully, we can see that.
Yes, sir. And as always, thanks for joining the show, Pat.
Appreciate it.